Okay.
But okay, so how about I'll do the intro, a little bit of an intro, and then we can hop right into it. What do you think?
After you, sir.
So thanks everyone who is not here today yet joining us, but for when you're gonna watch it, I'm Ali El-Mokadem, and this is
Francesca McKenzie.
thank you very much. And so this is part
Um,
of a
oh,
four-part
okay, sorry.
series that we decided to do into health and fitness. Um, and then who knows, maybe we'll do more of it depending on the kind of feedback we get. If you have any questions that you'd like us to address or answer, please feel free to shoot them our way. The first installment today, so we're going to be talking about personal training, kinesiology, and the area of fitness specialization. So this is, I think, something that both Francesca and I have written about before. Specifically, I wrote about the difference between personal trainers and fitness specialists. Francesca has written about the difference between a personal trainer and kinesiologist. Some very important distinctions, though I know people sort of want to group them all under one umbrella. And we're hoping that by doing this, we can give everyone a bit more of an idea of those nuances between the fields. And then, Francesca, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, yes, we've both written about it. You've made even some like recent Instagram posts on why virtual personal training is great and beneficial, especially during these times,
Mm-hmm.
and just advocating for the personal training profession as well. And where was I going with this? I also wrote about it. It's on my blog, getyourfitnessfix.com. And I think just the profession of kinesiology, it's a newer profession, but a lot of people still don't really know what it is, let alone they can't pronounce kinesiology. So today is a really good opportunity to shed some light on the amazing profession. I'm so glad that I wrote my board exam to become a kinesiologist because it's just elevated what I do and how I help my clients and patients on a day-to-day basis in their everyday lives. So we can break that down a little bit
Awesome.
further. Yeah.
Yeah, and just as a heads up to everyone that both Francesca and I have been doing personal training for quite some time, almost for a decade for myself, for Francesca more than a decade. And to sort of understand how you can be a fitness specialist while also doing personal training. But my approach to it was that personal training doesn't necessarily means you're specializing in fitness. And that's sort of part of where I want to dive into today, because you can, and I've known people throughout my years as well who did personal training, but it was more of sort of like a side gig in order to try to either fuel something else that they were working on, or maybe it was just something they're interested in dabbling with. And maybe we can shed a little bit more light on that. So essentially, how this will go is, if you don't mind, Francesca, I'll go first and just talk about personal training and then set you up so you can explain a little bit more about kinesiology and what you've done and how that sort of fed into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, since you have been doing personal training for quite some time as well, I'm going to look for your input as well on this whole idea of the personal trainer. Because when we say that word, there's usually this stereotype that comes up as somebody who, yells orders at you, tells you to give them one more rep. There's always one more rep, right?
My mom,
Uh,
for the longest time, just thought I was like Jillian Michaels and like yelled at my clients all day long. And don't you just count reps? It's not really a job. I'm like, I was so offended. But there's
and
so much more that goes into the profession and it deserves respect. Absolutely.
Absolutely, and 100%. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's sort of the stereotypical idea that I find a lot of gyms and clubs and magazines push about certain about personal trainers, that
Mhm.
a personal trainer is there who to basically count your reps, to take you on a guided tour of the gym. Here we have the leg press machine, and you'll notice if you look to your right, you have the hamstring curls, right?
Right.
And that's really sort of a base understanding of what it is. And it's unfortunate because in essence, it also devalues the profession itself, that we, you know, there goes our education and what we know about anatomy and physiology and so on and so forth. So the stereotypical trainer is somebody who yells orders at you or makes up a program, takes you on a little guided tour of the gym and the exercises, and that's it. That's sort of what people think you pay them for. But there's definitely much more to that, right? So personally, when I went to school, I went to Humber College to do my diploma in health and fitness. And as part of that requirement, it's a 2-year program. I went through it in 1 year because we had that option, which is great. And part of the requirements were taking courses on anatomy and physiology, exercise physiology, specifically exercise anatomy, because it's one thing to understand or know a little bit about muscles. It's completely different to understand how they function when you're exercising. And the same thing for physiology. Looking at the physiology of somebody who's just existing versus somebody who's existing and exercising, like what happens to your metabolism when you're exercising is nothing short of amazing and fantastic, right?
Fascinating. Yeah.
And like you've had a lot, like you've done some competitions, some like fitness competitions where you've had to sort of work and fine tune the little things of your metabolism and your physiology, right? So I
Mhm.
thought maybe you could say something about that and how that requires more knowledge than just like, I'm just going to do 20 reps here, 15 reps there, and get a sweat on.
Yeah, there's absolutely a science to, like, it is science. There's a science to personal training. There's a science to kinesiology is the science of movement. Literally, that's what the definition is. And when I think back to my fitness journey, I started off really overweight. I was almost 200 pounds. And to lose weight, like I was already doing my undergrad in kinesiology and health science when I started my weight loss journey. So I had a little bit of a foundation already when it came to the science of weight loss, calories in, calories out, working out at a specific heart rate. What is my heart rate? And putting all of the calculations into making my program specific in order to hit my goals. And then also just the science of training, hitting failure and periodizing and progressive overload, like using all of those principles into my program. Like everything that I've done in my own personal fitness career, whether it's designing programs for my clients or doing a bodybuilding competition or training for sports, or because I used to do varsity sports and running, like everything is led by science. So it's not just counting reps and just being there. You're actually responsible for a person's well-being and their health. And that is going to influence every aspect of the person's life. So personal training, kinesiology in their own respect, there's so much more to just sitting and watching the client. There's definitely more that goes into it every day.
And that's a very important point, I think, with regards to the amount of education and the kind of education that goes into it, because we both know there's no shortage of organizations that will give you a personal training certificate with you just doing sort of an exam over a weekend, right? And it's
Right.
like, here's the book, just read the basics, understand that this is what a set is, this is what a rep is, this is the rep range you want to stick to elicit this type of change. And then in that sense, anyone and everyone can become a personal trainer,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And that's part of the issue that takes away a little bit from the profession, because it's not regulated in that sense, even though there's people like myself and a lot of other people that I know that I worked with who've also graduated from similar programs, whether Humber, George Brown, and other areas, that required them to essentially engage with material, make presentations, be told that they're wrong, and have to figure out why they're wrong, and go on a sort of a hunt and research and understand further what is involved in constructing a program for someone or dealing
Mm-hmm.
with a client. like I had to do courses on sports psychology and understand what the behavior model for change is for people, because a lot of the clients come to you with that sort of understanding that, like, look, I'm putting my trust and my faith in you, and I need some help. And I think clients should definitely push that a little bit further as an expectation from their trainers. Like, I don't just want you to tell me what exercises to do. I need you to educate me and empower me so that I understand like a little bit more about myself and my body and my movement and what my challenges are. Right. And so
I think clients definitely need to be more proactive, especially with that. Absolutely.
That's where I sort of think the certifications, education, and scope of practice also intermingle in personal training. So that it's not just, hey, I got this organization, for example, CanFit Pro gave me my personal training certificate and that was it. So for me, before I could train any clients after my education at Humber College, I was at least required to get a training certificate through CanFit. But then I went on to do another certification with CSEP, which is the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiologists. And that pretty much in Canada is sort of the cream of the crop in
Gold
terms of, right, exactly. In terms of, would you say like, not controlling or monitoring, but regulating the profession and making sure that people are getting top-notch service, top-notch latest and greatest research, evidence-based scientific research on exercise and physiology and so on and so forth. And so that's pretty much where I think I'll leave it for now for personal training. And I'd love to hear about, you know, from you about how you describe kinesiology to somebody who comes up to you and says, well, isn't that just a personal trainer?
No. Short answer, no. A lot of people, so I remember when I was studying for my board exam, and I remember, first of all, writing the exam was heavy, but it was great as a really fair exam. But I remember when I was getting ready to study for it, and there was a lot that is covered, you know, ergonomics, exercise physiology, and there's also criteria that you need to meet in order to even be eligible to write this exam. When some people ask me, what is kinesiology and what's the difference? The easiest way I break it down, even though this is not the most accurate way to describe it, it's just the shortest, okay, this is kind of how I can portray it, kind of consider the middle between like a physiotherapist and a personal trainer or sports performance or someone that deals with chronic diseases, because there's actually, kinesiology has a wide scope of practice. So you were saying with personal training, what I know with personal training is usually a personal trainer deals with the apparently healthy population. So there's no pre-existing conditions, there's no limitations, they don't have a history of chronic disease, they're just looking for fitness, accountability, a structured program. A kinesiologist can work that population as well. And there's a lot more that goes into that. We can also work with special populations. So those with metabolic syndrome, those who have type 2 diabetes, cancer, chronic pain, years of chronic pain, such as fibromyalgia. And we can also work in a multidisciplinary care system. So that means a regulated health professional, such as a kinesiologist, can also work with like a primary healthcare team. So a doctor, a dietitian, and we can have a multidisciplinary approach when it comes to treating the patient. Also with a kinesiologist, there are criteria that a kinesiologist has to have and they need to abide by in order to maintain their standards at the college. So kinesiology is a regulated profession. It's regulated at the provincial level. So each province has its own governing body. And each kinesiologist or each member of the college needs to have at least a kinesiology and health science degree. Okay. We also have a standards or code of ethics that we have to abide by. We do biannual self-assessments, and there's other aspects of our profession that we have to abide by as well. So, for example, we have to perform mandatory reporting. If I was treating a client and I think I might have committed sexual assault, for example, like might have, right? Like maybe I touched them and I noticed they were uncomfortable. I have an obligation to report that to the college, and then the college would investigate. Okay, because the primary objective when practicing as a kinesiologist is to protect the public. Everything that we do is to protect the public. That's number one, safety. And alongside that, to ensure that we protect the public, we have to perform mandatory note-taking. Okay, so I have to like take notes and document, so mandatory documenting. I perform self-audits, so I make sure I have all of my patients and clients' information. It's private, it's secure, and I'm always monitoring that. With the COVID-19 pandemic, I have to make sure that I have cybersecurity and professional liability insurance. I can't believe I forgot to mention that one. That was like a super important one. All kinesiologists have to have professional liability insurance. So there's a set criteria being a regulated health profession that allows us to have such a wide scope of practice and treat as many patients as we can, or as we do within our profession, but again, the number one objective is to protect the public.
And that's super important. I think that you brought that up, where in a sense, it's not about which profession is more glorified or which is better or anything like that, but more so that as a kinesiologist, you have so much more on your shoulder. You are responsible for so much more. You have a lot more, at stake or on the table, that should you ever be called on to either defend your work or, like you said, explain why you were doing something, that stuff all has to be noted, or you have to be able to draw upon that material. So in a sense, I think personal trainers can really learn from that, and how it's really important for us as well to take notes about our clients. This is all just sort of part of best practices, and if it's not, it should be. I've worked with some great people who, were very diligent about making sure to take notes about specific cases with some of their clients and share that with other healthcare professionals. So scope of practice is a huge part of this, right? Where I may be able, let's say, as a personal trainer or as a fitness specialist, and we'll talk about the difference that I see between both in a sec, to assess certain things, but I certainly can't diagnose, right? That's a huge thing in person. You don't diagnose, you're assessing. And if you make an assessment and you have an idea, send it over to someone who knows about that idea, who knows a lot more.
Yeah,
right?
That's very similar with kinesiology as well. I don't mean to cut you off, but kinesiologists can't diagnose either. Even though we're a regulated health profession, we cannot diagnose. We can make a clinical impression. Okay, so like when we conduct our assessment, we can make a clinical impression. Even if I know exactly, nail on the head, what the issue is or what the diagnosis potentially is, I cannot communicate that diagnosis to the patient. And if I need a diagnosis, if I need to be really sure in terms of like how I can help and treat this patient, I have to refer out, get that diagnosis, and then I can potentially collaborate with that healthcare professional and have a multidisciplinary approach when it comes to treating the patient.
I just thought of something else that I think is also really important to bring up, something that you told me before, and I think this is a very important difference and distinction between both, in that you mentioned that kinesiologists aren't allowed to be sponsored by any specific like brand or whatever. Is that am I understanding?
So I actually got this out because there are a set of ethics and standards that all provincial bodies hold their kinesiologists accountable for. So I have even just like, these are the set of standards that kinesiologists have to abide by. And we have to ensure that we're not going to find ourselves in a situation of conflict of interest. And conflict of interest is, it can be a number of scenarios. So so just to paint an example, if I send a client to get, I don't know, KT tape or some sort of like medical modality from this particular supplier, but for every client that I send to that supplier, they pay me some sort of monetary value or pay me a cut. That's conflict of interest. I do not have the patient's interest at heart or the public's interest at heart, and that gets me reported. So that's something that kinesiologists, that's just one example. There's so many different variations of conflict of interest, but that's again governed by the province, where a personal trainer, again, depending on the organization that you're with or you got your certification from, there's really no set guidelines. You can be, you can it right. So you can.
Oh no, are you kidding? We're like personal trainers are usually like the first one that the like health brands and fitness brands go to, and that's like part of the issue is that you see a lot of them sort of promoting garbage, right? It's like,
or
what?
buy
I'm
this
not eating that worm, like.
Yeah, get this protein powder because it's the best, but really it's not. And, you know, the client, it doesn't even fit the client's need, but meanwhile, the trainer or whomever is kind of putting money in their pocket for everything that they sell. So again,
So then this is, I think, is a good segue to sort of talk about real quick the difference or the umbrella of fitness specialists, and where, you know, I think there's personal trainers and then fitness specialists, where I would put kinesiologists under. And this is my reasoning why, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay.
So I've worked with a number of very knowledgeable people, yourself included, who had a number of different certifications to allow them to practice a certain way, right? So we think of personal trainer and then we think of, great, I want to lift really heavy weights, so I'm just going to go to a personal trainer. Okay, but that personal trainer may specialize in, you know, long distance running or cardio specific activities, and may not be able to give you the best thing you're looking for when it comes to, say, if you're looking to compete in a weightlifting competition or powerlifting competition, what have you. So one of the main things is then the kind of certifications. If you graduate or get a personal training certificate that allows you to train clients at a base level, that's great. But if you're looking for something more specialized, like you want to learn more about kettlebell or more about mobility and or yoga or anything extra, you need to go to somebody who has specific certifications in those areas. That isn't just like, hey, I'm a personal trainer. It's like, okay, great. What kind of certifications do you have? Well, I'm a personal trainer. How familiar are you with kettlebell, mobility, yoga, any of them? Not really. You know, I'm a personal trainer. I can take you on a tour of the gym, sure, but I can give you the best information that I have to allow you to progress. And in that sense, you know, that's where I started thinking more critically about this idea of a fitness specialist. So someone who goes beyond just personal training, who has chosen to make fitness and health specialization a practice or a career, not just sort of the side thing that I'm going to do while I work on something else. I had a bunch of teachers at school, for example, who told me, oh yeah, I did personal training part-time to pay my way through school, or, you know, to pay some bills through school. And then once I was done, that was it. I wouldn't necessarily call someone like that a fitness specialist, because they literally just told me I was just doing it to get by. Right. And so while I have my background in personal training, I've done personal training, but I've also, and I know a bunch of other people like that who say have gotten certifications in muscle activation technique, resistance training specialists, nutrition, specific kinds of nutrition, you know, not just here, follow Canada's food guide, but I'm able to educate you specifically about calories in versus calories out, what certain hormones and how they affect the body and how metabolism works. And go beyond just sort of well, here's the Canada's Food Guide recommendation, or
Mm-hmm.
here's what doctors are specifically saying about this. Still not diagnosing anything, but I have a bit more weight to what I do in terms of I can do more assessments than
Absolutely.
just here, go on these are the exercises you should be doing in order to, get the most out of your exercises or your lifestyle. Stick within
Mm-hmm.
this range for reps, stick within this target heart rate, and off you go.
Right.
What's your thought on that?
So twofold, like I completely agree with what you're saying that a personal trainer that specializes in pre and postnatal or precision nutrition or whatever, they definitely can hold more weight and they can provide that specificity to the client, especially when they have specific goals. Absolutely. On the flip side, I can put myself in this category a little bit, and there's so many other personal trainers that I've met to this day that they may not hold a certification, but they've done so much due diligence in the research and the education, and they just may not hold the certification. So it's you make an excellent point, but then there's other trainers who just definitely go above and beyond, and they know as much or maybe even more than those that have the certification, but they just don't have the paper to prove it or the paper to show for it. So I think the onus is on both the trainer, or I'll talk about kinesiology in a second. The onus is on the personal trainer as well as the client. I really feel the client can be more proactive in who you are looking to work with. Interview them, interview who you're potentially going to be working under. What certifications do you hold? Or if you don't, like, what can you tell me about this? Like the client, especially if you're paying money and you want as much value out of the service as possible, definitely be comfortable with who you're working with and just really know what type of information and value they'll be able to provide you in your ongoing relationship. With kinesiology, again, the standards that's set out by the provincial government is really you have to practice within your scope. If I did not hold any extra certifications in writing meal plans, for example, since we were talking about nutrition briefly, then I really shouldn't be doing it, right? And I can just refer out to somebody that specializes in that. And again, that doesn't, take the client away from me. I think that's a huge respect. If the kinesiologist or if the personal trainer simply doesn't know, how to go about helping the client that's looking for X, then just direct them to somebody that does. The client is not going to see you in a negative light because they're going to respect you for it, right?
And that's sort of the other issue here is you touched on as well is the legality or the legal side of things, right? So if somebody, let's say, is working with a personal trainer who doesn't have a, let's say, certification in low back pain assessment or something, and then another one who does have it, and the person gets injured as a result, going to someone who doesn't have that certification, right, and trying to say, look, you hurt me, the person can just sort of come back with, well, I was doing the best as I can.
Yeah.
Whereas the other person can come back with, well, I followed everything like X, Y, and Z. So like I did my due diligence based on the knowledge that I have, and here's the piece of paper to prove it. And to your point, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of great, amazing personal trainers, and that is not, I wasn't trying to say that, if you're not a fitness specialist, then you're not a good personal trainer. There's some amazing personal trainers who that's all they've done. And maybe, to your point, experience should definitely be one of those things that we bring to the table. Like, okay, great, you have 10 pieces of paper, but you've been practicing for 1 year and you've had 20 clients, whereas I've been practicing for 10 and I've had over 1,000.
Yes.
Meaning, like, I've interacted and worked with other healthcare professionals, kinesiologists, physiotherapists, chiropractors, so on and so forth. And this, I think, brings me to my last point that I think we should touch on is the value and you know, what people think they're paying for when they go to, say, either a personal trainer or a kinesiologist, because they believe as I'm paying for the session, so once I'm done the session, that's it. Why should I pay you so much for 60 minutes of your time, for example? And that sort of trivializes what we do as prep and as afterwards. So when people, for example, go to see you, you're telling them what to do during the session, but they're not seeing you create the programs. And I've been there. Like, I've seen you sitting down for time on end, writing down programs and considerations and looking things up and doing the background research. And then after you close with the client, the session is done, you're emailing them homework, you're preparing for the next time, you're making notes about what happened in the session, making modifications if you need to, right? So if you can say, in your experience, something about, say, the value outside of the session as well.
Wow. The value that the client has outside of the session. Even before I became a kinesiologist, I would always say that, you know, if the client can take what I've given them or train them to do or educate them on and apply it to their everyday life, like that's a win for me. I've had clients to say that, you know, I really remember what you had said about my breathing and doing all of this, and it just made a huge impact in my anxiety, or it's made a huge impact in the way that I sleep, which obviously affects so many other things. The thing with, I guess, there's price and then there's value, right? I think a lot of clients will look at the price of working with a kinesiologist or the price of working with a personal trainer, and again, to what you had said, not really see the value in what goes into that 60 minutes and what happens behind the scenes in that 60 minutes. Because if you were to give like a hypothetical situation to a client and say, okay, you want to run a marathon or you want to squat 100 pounds or whatever the goal is, design the program for that thing. And they wouldn't really know how to do it. Like, where do I start? Or like, you know, what goes into it? And it becomes an even more complex situation if the client has high blood pressure or femoral acetabular impingement, or like if you are riddled with injury, but you definitely want to try to get to X, Y, or whatever, then it's not as simple as just going in and starting to lift 100 pounds, right? Even my sister, she's independent and she had trained for a marathon, but her only course of action towards that training was just running more, right? Mm-hmm. So she learned the hard way. She was sore and got injured and et cetera, et cetera. But that initial cost or that initial price would have been much more valuable to her in terms of how her performance would have been for her marathon, because I would have introduced, you know, or not necessarily me, but
yes.
Functional training. I hate using that term, but you know what I mean.
Topic
right.
for another day.
Maybe we should add a fifth week. Functional training, what is it? Nothing to Bosu ball. But you know, structured programming, rest and recovery. What should your fuel be? What should you be eating before or after you're running? You know, how much sleep? And there's so much that goes into achieving a goal, as opposed to just, you can't just run a marathon and then be better at running a marathon. You have to do everything in between. So the value is in how much easier your blueprint can look towards achieving that goal.
I like that. That. The value in how much easier the blueprint can be towards achieving the goal.
Right. It's not going to just be kind of like scribbles, right? Or it can take a person multiple attempts. You have to, and it's like SMART goal planning, you know, the acronym of SMART, right? You have to outline what the tasks are, right? You have the plan, but what are the tasks in order to get to the goal? I think that's where a lot of people would kind of struggle. Like, to say, okay, I want to be faster, I want to lose weight, but do you know exactly what tasks need to be implemented in order to do it? Right. So I think that's the missing That's the value in either working with a kinesiologist or working with a personal trainer.
Right, right. Yeah, agreed. And so I think this is great. I think this is a good place to wrap it up and finish on that note. So, we covered some, I think, very important issues. I will be posting this video for everyone to see if you didn't have a chance to tune in or you had to leave midway through or whatever. Please send us any questions you may have. We'd love to hear what people are thinking about when it comes to health and fitness. And if this is something that, people are interested in learning more about, who knows, we may keep on doing more of it.
I like this. It could be like a Friday segment.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I should get like an official microphone.
You should, or like one of these, whatever this is. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
I'll let you have the last word. What would you like to end off with?
Well, hopefully anybody that tuned in gained a little bit more insight as to what a kinesiologist does and within their scope and what a personal trainer does. And it's not that one profession is better than the other. They're absolutely not. I think that the client needs to understand that if you are apparently healthy, you don't really have a lot of limitations and you're looking for that accountability, improving your fitness, a personal trainer is definitely the way to go. And a kinesiologist can provide that as well. In addition to, if you do have a history of chronic disease, if you do have any injuries or other pre-existing conditions, then a kinesiologist might be more appropriate for you. Kinesiologist is also a tax-deductible service provincially. I think both professions are well respected, and I think people can take into consideration both of those when it comes to working with somebody. Right on.
Love it. Well said. So that's great. I think this was a great first
right.
Totally looking forward to the next one. Join us next Friday, same time.
Virtual.
We'll be talking about the value of virtual training, which I think is super important now. Everybody thought that it was just going to be in the interim, but I think based on what's been happening and how people have been feeling about it, it's pretty much here to stay.
I think it is here to stay too. Even what I think might happen, just as a prediction or maybe a tidbit into next week, it's that clients, I think, are going to be interchanging between the two, because in-person training definitely has a lot of value, and I don't think anything can replace that. But being able to quickly flip to virtual if you can't make it to the gym this week, or if you got to travel, it's going to be an interesting thing to see in the future, how this unfolds.
For sure.
Yeah.
So